Seeing today exactly what teachers feared and what many parents and many principals feared would happen with the publication of the data on the My School website. Apart from the incredible number of inaccuracies in that website and information which is already being significantly misinterpreted, we're now seeing today the culture of naming, blaming and shaming schools. Despite all the assertions by the Deputy Prime Minister over recent months and by other ministers in the federal government and the state government, we've now seen the construction of the very simplistic league tables that they said that they were not in favour of and they didn't wish to encourage. We're now headed down the pathway that's been followed in England, where they've had league tables for the last 2 decades, and despite those league tables being in place, despite the very sort of exercise that's taken place in Australia today with the publication of league tables, despite all that in England over the last 2 decades, there has been no significant improvement in student outcomes. In fact, if you look at the international measures of a student assessment, Australia ranks well above England in those measures. And it's a sad day when we decide that that's the example we wish to follow, that's the pathway we wish to go along. We're very concerned now that we're going to see a distortion in what's taught in our schools. Teachers aren't fools, and if they're going to be judged, as inappropriate it is, by such measures, you'll see people now teaching to the tests. You'll see the very things that they've warned against in England, and most recently warned against by Dr Ken Boston, a former Director General of Education in New South Wales, who left that position to head up the examination section of the English education system, where he warned that the experience in England with league tables, with the publication of data similar to that which has been published in Australia now, that primary education in England has been reduced to a dry husk. The very man who, say, was previously in charge of education in the state warned us not to go down the pathway they'd followed in England. The person who told us that in England up to 70% of teachers' time, up to 70% of student time in the time leading up to the tests in England is now spent coaching for the tests. The very man who warned us that drama, that music, that art, that excursions all have suffered enormously in the English educational system as a result of that distortion that's occurred around league tables. We're still hoping the government will take action. We're hoping that it will take action to ensure that this doesn't happen again. But if it doesn't, that's the pathway we're afraid we're headed down with the government. The teachers in schools, of course, aren't identified, despite assertions by the Deputy Prime Minister that somehow this will enable you to identify teachers who are in some way underperforming, aren't at all identified by this process. You can't point at any school on the list published today and say that teachers in that school are not working their hardest to ensure the best education for the children in those schools. And it's disgraceful for anyone to suggest otherwise. Same as you can't point at the schools at the top of the table, published in today's paper, and argue that there something is happening that's wonderful and not available to students in many other schools across the state. I should stress this isn't a public-private issue. It's not about whether public schools or private schools are performing better or less. For any school, it's an invalid exercise. The data is never designed to be used in the way it's been used in the last 24 hours, and it's no guide to parents to determine anything about what is happening of any worthwhile nature in any school in New South Wales, let alone across Australia.